Welcome to the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast, where we equipped you to more effectively lead your seat at any employer, business, or industry in which you choose to play. Each week, we help you sharpen your leadership acumen by cracking open the playbooks of dynamic leaders who are doing big things in their professional endeavors. And now your host, leadership tactics and organizational development expert, Karen Farrell-Rhodes.
Hello, my superstars. This is Karen, and welcome to another episode of the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast. I am super pleased and honored to have such a special guest on this show who has worked for many years with many significant leaders across the globe. And I'm so happy to delve into some of his tips and knowledge that he has learned over the years and of what he has written about in his new book. On today's show, we have Hugh Blane, who is the author of the book Lead Boldly. Let me say that correctly. How to Coach Others to Greatness. He's also the founder and principal of Claris Consulting, which is an executive coaching and human capital advisory firm. As a coach, Hugh has generated over $75 million of client and enterprise value for clients such as Sony Pictures, Starbucks, Costco, Stanford University, Wells Fargo, and a host of other logos that you know and love. I can't wait to hear how he approaches coaching, what he's learned about leadership or effective leadership over the years, and what other lessons that he shares in his book. So welcome to the podcast, Blane.
So good to be here. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Hugh. It's called you by your last name, Hugh. It's so
They're
glad
both
to
first
have you.
names, and I answer to both of them. Yeah.
Well, thank you again. We're super honored to have you. And I know our listeners who are all very focused on really trying to improve their leadership skills and approach. They're probably very hungry on a tip or two, which I know you'll share during the course of the podcast. But before we delve into that, we always love to learn a little bit more about our guests. So for just as much as you feel comfortable, would you mind giving us a sneak peek into your life outside of work?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So one of the things that people typically would not know, unless I tell them, is that I'm a native-born Scotsman. And so the only way that I can really prove that and, make sure I got the chops is to talk in a Scottish accent for a period of time. So I'm going to do this. So my name is Hugh Blane. I was born in Glasgow, Scotland, lived there until I was 9 years old, and then I immigrated from Scotland to Canada to Birmingham, Alabama. Now I'm going to stop doing the Scottish accent because if my Scottish relatives are listening, they say, stop it. That is the worst Scottish accent we've ever heard. The thing that is central to, I just don't know really where it came from, but I love the idea of helping people make their dreams come true.
Huh.
And I do that in a corporate context. And the reason why that's so important, backstory, is that that's not what happened for my parents. My mother was a coal miner's daughter. She married the big guy on campus, who was my father, one of 10 kids, raised by nannies, silver spoon in his mouth, from a wealthy family in Scotland. There was a financial reversal that had, when I was 6 years old, 3 men come to repossess our furniture.
Oh.
And my parents never recovered financially.
Oh.
So it was my 5'1" redheaded mother that said, we're moving to a place of opportunity. And that's how we ended up in the United States in 1969.
Amazing.
I tell you that because I was front and center, Karen, to the integration of schools, at that particular time. Now, I had never seen an African American before.
Wow.
It's just like, and all of a sudden, I'm on a deck overlooking 4 young African American women coming into my school and starting. And I was curious, why is it that everybody likes to talk to me, but not to talk to them?
Right.
So I didn't really understand that. So it was completely foreign for me. So the thing that I love is this idea of, why do you do what you do? And how often are you doing that unconsciously? How often are you doing it purposefully? So the thing that just absolutely animates me is this idea of, we all have this potential, But how often do we really convert that into inspired performance? And I do that with young adults. I've worked with a lot of at-risk kids. I work with a lot of young adults that are transitioning out of college and then going into the world of work. And they are hungry for just some direction.
Yeah.
So all of that kind of comes together for me, that life experience plus my professional life. That's what really animates me on a personal level.
Oh, what an inspiring story. Thank you for sharing that. And I can see the passion behind the reasoning and the purpose of what you do, even in this that short little clip. And if I must say so myself, I think the world is better. I haven't been on every single engagement or every single place of employment that you've had, but your spirit seems to really be in that giving and helping others mode. And I can really
Well, thank
appreciate
you. I
that.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes. All right, Hugh. Well, let's dive into if you could share just a tad about maybe your career up to the time that you founded your firm, and then we'll talk about a bit more about how you assist and coach executives and in what areas.
Yeah. So, what's interesting about your question is that when I was 32, I had moved out to Washington State to do a business reorganization turnaround as part of a consulting team that was taking this business that was really in struggle. And so we did this turnaround, and I got a golden parachute. It was, for somebody who was 31, 32, is like, wow, I like this. This is really kind of
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
And then my father passed away, and my father passed away without any financial resources, no insurance. And so I ended up moving my mother from Gulf Shores, Alabama, out here to Seattle, Washington, where I lived because she needed some financial help.
Sure.
And at that point, I said, well, what's the next act? What am I going to do next? And the financial advisor that I was working with said, why don't you come into the financial services business? You're really good with people. You're really good with numbers. You're really good with figuring out strategy and those types of things. You'd be great. And I said, okay, because dad didn't have any money. And I started working primarily with women. And I said, do you know what's going on in your financial life? And if not, let's find out so that you can make informed, educated decisions about what happens next.
Absolutely.
So I went into the financial services business for 11 years, built up a small practice, but it was primarily devoted to technology leaders and their families. And I was working with a lot of Microsoft executives. Did that for 11 years. And then I had a stepdaughter that was killed by a drunk driver.
Oh,
Um,
I'm so sorry to hear.
and I remember looking at my bookshelf and I was asking the question, so what's next? And, Nicole is not here. The family's devastated. What do I do?
Right.
And I looked at my bookshelf and there was nothing on there about financial advising. There were books about communication. There was books about leadership. There was books about psychology and sociology and what made people think. And I looked at it and said, wonder if I could do that. How would I go about doing that? And I think it was at that moment that I said, I don't want to continue doing that. If the next 5 years of my life is exactly the same as the last 5 years, I'm not signing up for it. I want to do something different.
Good for you.
And I started thinking, well, what would that look like? And I met a woman by the name of Nancy Winship that worked for a gentleman by the name of Tom Peters, who, if people don't remember, Tom Peters 50 years ago wrote a book called In Search of Excellence. Tom is a wicked smart
Who
guy.
is. But
So I
I
got,
think I know if this is the same Nancy Winship, I know Nancy.
really? She lives out here?
I don't know where she lives now, but I worked at Microsoft for 14 years.
Oh, did you?
Yes. And if it's this, I don't, there are probably multiple people, but I know a Nancy Winship. So I'm gonna have to look
Oh,
that
that's
up after we
awesome.
get off the podcast.
Yeah. So Nancy and I met, and this is going to sound like a really kind of crazy story. I met her in a bar
Uh-huh.
where there was some sort of networking taking place. And she just asked me this question. So what do you do? I said, well, I'm thinking about this and it's not really fully formed, but I think I'd love to do this. And she said, there's somebody you ought to meet. Now, call it serendipity or the Holy Spirit. I don't know which word, but I said, yeah, who do I need to meet?
Right.
And she introduced me to a gentleman by the name of Dick Heller of the Tom Peters Company. I flew down to California to meet him.
Uh-huh.
And he said, record a video of you facilitating and I'll take a look at it. So I pulled out the stops and I got this really cool video done, sent it to him. And he then said, Okay.
I'm sold.
Welcome to the Tom Peters Company.
Oh,
Now,
wow.
I wanted to have your audience think about this. It was first and foremost, I don't want to do this, but I don't know how to do that. So, in that ambiguity, I do the only thing I know to do. I start talking to people. Tell me about this. Tell me what do I not know? And then I met Nancy, met Dick Heller. And for the next 2.5 years, I traveled the world working with Tom Peters.
Amazing.
So I was in South Korea, I was in Japan, I was in Singapore. I was all over the place. And that's where I started to learn about behavior change inside large organizations. And so that's where I started cutting my teeth in this particular domain. And so I was there for 2.5 years. Then that was right after, then there was the financial crisis and there was a whole other host of things going on. And that position ended. And then I went to work for another company here locally. And I became a partner there and stayed there for until 2009. And what I've always been just really passionate about is if you've got this potential, why is it, Karen, that so many people don't realize it?
Yeah.
How come they don't rise up and live into it?
Right.
And so that's been the backdrop. And where I am now, I started this company in 2009. And I have a little bit of a sweet spot, which is that I do a lot of work with Fortune 500 companies, especially those who are banks and in financial institutions, because I understand that space.
Right.
And I work with people who are technically brilliant, but have no people skills. And so
And do they
when
know
you
they
think,
don't have the people skills? Because sometimes
no,
realization is
no,
hard.
sometimes they are told, by the
Yeah.
way, you have no people
Yeah.
skills. So that space is one that I'm really familiar with. So in the cybersecurity space within banks, it's a labor intensive industry where people feel overwhelmed and overburdened, and it feels like a battlefield to them.
All the time.
And I'm on a mission to kind of go in there and help them, because if they don't have the psychological hardiness, it will just remain a battle.
Exactly.
And the security and the threats for the institutions will continue to be threats, and they won't be able to combat them.
Amazing.
So, a little bit of the arc from financial services into training and development into this work that I do now. So, did I answer your question?
You did it wonderfully
Okay.
too, because this is my space too. This is my bailiwick, so I'm just
I know.
mesmerized. That's amazing.
Well, and I would let me add one thing to that. There are times when I have not known what the future looks like, but I do know that sometimes I just have to do one foot in front of the
That's
other.
right. That's right.
And that is the unknown, the unsafe, that part.
Yes.
There is, and I don't know, you've probably seen this in your work. How many people truly understand what they are capable of? I think that we are capable of so much more.
5 times
And
more.
and it's like I just want to then just start a conversation and say, where are you? Now, you and I will do this as professional coaches. Where are you? Where do you want to be?
Right.
Now, when people start telling me where they want to be, their first answer is never the right answer.
No.
They just start giving me the bus stop conversation kind of stuff.
Right.
And then I go, okay, so let's peel that back a little bit more. And there was a great question asked by Joel Barker once, who was a futurist. He said, what is impossible for you? That if you could address it, it would be a game changer for you. And most people, when they hear that question, go, well, wait a minute, if it's impossible,
How can I
then
do
it's
it?
impossible. Then I can't do anything about it. And I said, yeah, but what if it's just a perception shift? What if what you define as impossible is actually really possible? But we need to change our vocabulary. Now, I'm not into the woo-woo stuff, but I can lean into that and say, let's make that, what if it was this? What if it was this? What if it was this?
And talk about
Are
the
those
perceived roadblocks that you may have. And what if those didn't exist?
absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
So you may know Hal Hirschfield recently wrote a book called Future Self.
Yeah.
And there's some really interesting information there, which is that financial institutions, when they were enrolling people in 401k plans, they would actually age progress the pictures of the individuals and put a small picture of the age progressed person on their dashboard. So when they came to make decisions about how much money they were going to invest, people invested 17% more. I believe that's the number, 17% more when they saw their future self.
Because it reminded them of themselves
It
in the future.
reminded them, and when most people don't understand who they're going to be in the future, they disassociate with their future self. It's a
Ah,
theory, it's a construct. It's not real, it's not me. I
sure.
don't know that.
Right.
But the clearer people can see themselves in the future, then they can care for them. And I had somebody say to me once, and it was just brilliant. And they said, if two people are in a relationship and one of them does not feel cared for or cared about, the relationship will die.
Yes. That's true.
Right.
That's true.
So if I don't have a relationship with my 65-year-old self, my 55, 45, 35, then I'm going to make decisions that are disassociated from that person and I don't really care about them. So I make decisions solely rooted on what works for me today.
That makes sense.
So part of my work is to say, I want to help you just investigate what that future looks like and what a life of just flourishing looks like at work and at home.
That is
And I think that's because the moment somebody gets it, they're smart, they're talented, they know what to do. We then just have to help them fine tune it.
right.
Does that resonate with
It
you?
does so much. So I'm sitting here taking notes because it totally resonates with me, definitely. Because I always have when I talk to people, I speak. I always have a theory that the lines of what you're saying. If you don't have a picture of where you like to be or where you want to go, really, you're going to spin like the Tasmanian Devil, the cartoon, and you're not
Yeah,
going to make
right.
much progress towards that because you don't have a North Star. You don't know what
Mm.
you're trying to do. And even if you do understand where you're trying to go, sometimes you're going to have to pivot and you have to have a mindset of weathering the storm and refiguring out what your original plan was, why that may not work and why you might have to do something different. So it just brings up so much for me that we could
Well, and
probably talk for hours, but
you've probably had people on your podcast. You mentioned a really important word, which is mindset.
yes,
And
absolutely.
if you kind of pull those two words apart, mind and set, there's a lot of people who have a fixed mindset. And as Carol Dweck wrote about, fixed mindset versus growth mindset.
Correct.
And I think the reason why this is so central to who I am is because after three guys come to repossess our furniture, then fear entered into this 6-year-old kid's ecosystem.
Yeah.
And it would never have been articulated at 6. But when I had the same kind of financial reversal at 49, then it just brought all those things back up, which was that I was living in fear
Yes.
of not having enough, not being enough. And so I remember somebody saying to me, and I can't remember who it was Jeff Rogers. He said, "You're chasing money." So here's a leadership, maxim. You're chasing money. Money's not chasing you. So if you put money on the altar, that means that's the first and most important thing to you, and your clients will feel like they're just simply your ATM machine.
Exactly.
If you exchange that word money, 5 letters, with another 5-letter word, value, and create exquisite value for your customers,
Yeah.
money will start to follow you.
Absolutely.
And I was
Absolutely.
like, so that was a radical departure. And that, for me, that only started in 2009.
Well, it's never too late. What do we always say we're ongoing learners, right? So
That's
it's
right.
never too
Right.
late.
I keep on telling my wife that, honey, keep just trying. I am still a work in progress.
We all are.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to make sure we leave enough time to really go deep into your book. It is hot off the presses and it's called Lead Boldly: How to Coach Others to Greatness. And I would love for you to share a little bit about, what do you write about and maybe a tip or two that our audience can take away.
So it's in 3 sections, Karen. The sections are love deeply, learn daily, live boldly.
Love
And I will suggest that living and leading boldly is only possible if you do the first two. So here's what I would say. I think that the word love is used far too infrequently in the world of work. And here's just a tip for all the people who are listening. If you want your customers to love your company, then that requires your employees to love your customer. Now, that then means that if you want your employees to love your customer, you have to love them.
That's right.
Now, there are three kinds of love. There's the eros, which is when a person sees another person and says they're really attractive to me and they want to go towards that person because of the attractiveness piece. Well, eros is also where eroticism and erotic comes from. And I'm going to be bold and say that is somewhat self centered. In other words, if the beauty is out there, I want to possess it, right? And there's philia, which is a brotherly love, like Philadelphia. So we are more of a unified and it's a we. But there's this other kind of love that's really the one that I try to live by, which is called agape. And it's a sacrificial kind of love. It's not about me. I want to just do first and foremost what is in your highest and best interest. Now, that requires detachment from all the things that I want. So, for you to really love your employees, you have to figure out what is it that you deeply want and how do I help you get that? Now, if you're just here for a paycheck,
Can't do anything
how
with
much
that.
love is going to be given?
Right.
That's not going to work.
Right.
So, I just want to say if you want really stellar performance, it starts with find the idea, the dream, or the hope, or the aspiration that you as a leader, you as your team have for your customer. What is it you love about them, and what are you willing to not allow to go undone? So that's like number one. And then if you tell me what that is, then I'm going to say, Karen, great. Are you learning about that every single day? Now, in the Learn Daily section, I use 8 principles of what a healthy culture looks like. And the first one is humble swagger. And humble
I
swagger is
love
this idea that I'm not going to be the answer person to everything. I don't have all the answers, but I know we put 2 smart people on the podcast named Karen and Hugh. Cool stuff's going to
it.
happen.
Definitely is.
But there's a confidence in the humility. And that confidence says, listen, I know that when we put smart people together, this is going to work out really well. So if you love it, then you will be willing to implement these 8 principles of a healthy culture because you know that it's going to enable that human flourishing. Those 2 things, when they're present and you've learned something every day, then all I ask is just do one thing to pay it forward and get outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
That's the boldness I'm talking about. I'm not talking about jumping out of an airplane at 30,000 feet. Just do something to love somebody at work in a way, and that will serve you exceptionally well
Yeah. Make it.
in the world of work. So that's what the book in a nutshell is about.
Oh, I love that. May I share an example with you
Sure,
that
please.
brought up? So I was, being in human resources and being in corporate, unfortunately the sad side of things is when you have to help facilitate a separation or termination. And I still remember to this day an employee who was in North Carolina and had a tough time in the workplace. I'll just admit that. But I try to even have a positive and professional approach, even if it's a kind of a bad situation. Fast forward after it all was said and done, we did inform him he had to be terminated and he left. The next day, he called me back at work and asked if he could have my personal address, mailing address. And I asked him why. And he says, well, I wanted to send you a small gift and because you were so kind and you were able to let me leave with dignity. And that is so rare in a human resources person. Sometimes you're just focused on what you have to do and the message you have to deliver. And I so appreciate that. And I said, look, no, you don't have to send me a thing. I said, all I ask is that pay it forward to your next best opportunity. Because he was very talented and he was already, interviewing even the next day. But to your point about caring and love and treating others with the utmost respect and dignity, that sometimes really makes a difference and can create a better environment for them in the future because they'll be inspired by that. And
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
I've got a client right now that's similar to what you're talking about, which is that it's just incredibly stressful. I mean, think about it. North Korea, Iran, and all these nefarious companies that we have put sanctions on,
yeah,
they're now trying to penetrate all of these banks and financial
they
institutions. So
are.
the attacks that are going against them from a cyber perspective
Yeah.
are just unrelenting.
Yeah.
And so when you think about people who are just experiencing that kind of hardship on a daily basis, there's it becomes transactional with people as opposed to transformational. And in my first book, that was the thing where I said, listen, you will never accomplish anything of note if you try and do it all by yourself. You
Absolutely.
have to do it with people.
That's right.
So find smart, talented people who are on fire with an idea. And we know this, but Karen, it's been 40 years. We've been tracking employee engagement and it's still precariously low.
Very low. It
Why
sure
do
is.
you think that is?
There's a ton of reasons, but it's a lack of connection and meaningful purpose in what people are
Yeah.
doing, and a lack of, I would say, leadership on all levels. But I mean, there's a ton, but I'm curious, what do you think?
In my book, Seven Principles of Transformational Leadership, the first principle is purpose. And I said that its purpose is found in three words: love, talent, and value. So, in other words, you could love doing something, but it provides no value to your customer, and that's not going to be a good thing for your business. You may be really good at something, but you are not impassioned by it. And so you're just kind of going through the motions. And so it's really not on fire.
Right.
When you find something that you really love and that you are willing to build the skill and the talent to do it, to provide value to a customer, it's a game changer,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes.
And when I ask people in some of our assessment work, what is the mission and the purpose of this department? And what is your role in accomplishing it? I then pay attention. Can they answer the question in 30 seconds or less with clarity and conviction?
Yeah. Or are their
90,
eyes like a deer in the headlights, right?
I just did this with 7 people.
Uh-huh.
One gave me the answer of what the mission was. And then I said, well, that's interesting. It sounds like you were reading it. She said, yeah, I keep it on my desk. I said,
Well,
if
that's
you
good. At
didn't,
least she stays focused on it.
well, and I asked her, I said, if that were not on your desk, would you have been able to answer it? And she said, no.
Because they're not
And the
living it.
reason being is because she's become sign blind to it,
Yeah.
because within like 11 days of you putting something on your desk, you don't see it anymore.
No. No.
So
There.
she may have it on her desk and she may give herself some pats on the back for doing it, but she's not living it.
Yeah. And what's important is
So,
she's not living it with the team. They're not living it, number one. And then it's not reinforced because her colleagues aren't living it as well.
and I can speak into that because financial services is like that. They
Yeah,
think about things in financial
I
terms,
do understand
right?
that. Yep.
And so the humanity of finance, when it's done right, people really get
It's a
that.
game changer. Yeah.
It's a game changer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of our clients, I think it's okay to say, is Raymond James. And I
Oh,
totally
yeah.
get that world. It's a different approach sometimes you have to take to bring them along, but goodness. Well, I literally blinked and time has rolled. We could talk for hours, I know. But I cannot let you come out of here without answering our signature question that we ask all of our guests.
Mm.
And my audience knows that I wrote a book on leadership execution, and there's 7 main areas that came out of our research that we write about on best practices. And you were so kind to share that the one that really resonated with you, because all 7 are equally as important. You use them at different times, but the one that really resonated with you is leading with a drive for results. And for my new listeners out there, the way we define it is all about being very tenacious about ensuring your end goal or your objectives are achieved, even if you have to pivot along the way. So curious minds want to know, Hugh, why did that one really pop for you?
It popped for me because I have these really audacious goals about the impact that I want to have. And so it's a little bit like a missionary zeal, which is that if I want to impact 100,000 people in corporate America and feed into them and to help them rise up and live abundantly,
Yes.
then that means how many more people do I need to talk to?
Yeah, you got to bring more in
You
your
know,
pipeline.
right? So, so for me, the result is the impact that just animates me. So it's not just the result for result's sake, it's a purpose driven result. And when you feel like that's something that you really are, when you're in love with that idea, then you want to learn how to get better at it. And that is about the results you're getting, which means you got to be honest with yourself and tell you, here's where I am, here's where I want to be, how am I doing?
That is
So that's the reason why it piqued my interest.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, thank you for sharing that insight. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Now, Hugh, we are going to have a ton of information in our show notes about where to find you, links to your websites, and all that good stuff. But I always love for our guests, give time for our guests to air on the podcast where people can find you, just in case they don't click on that show notes link. So if you don't mind sharing a bit more of where they can find you, your book, and your company, that would be fantastic.
2 places. You can always find me on Amazon because, frankly, Amazon is the world's the biggest, search engine, right?
It is.
And you'll see both of my books there: 7 Principles of Transformational Leadership and Lead Boldly.
Nice.
The other place is clarisconsulting.net,
Okay.
CLARIS consulting.net, and that's where we hang out. And I'm on Instagram and TikTok and LinkedIn and
All the socials.
where all my social media team tells me to be.
And you follow their advice well. So that's great.
I do. They're younger, significantly younger, and they know what they're talking about.
Mine are too. So let me tell
Yeah.
you, I mean, they tell me to
Yeah.
turn right, I turn right. Tell me to turn left, I
Yes.
turn left, and I try to
I'm with
show up
you.
where I need to.
Yes, I'm with
Well,
you.
thank you so much, Hugh, for the gift of your time. We really appreciate it. And thank you for sharing a few tidbits with our audience too on leadership and things to think about, especially mindset.
Yeah. Well, if I can I just leave with this?
Yeah.
Hey, everybody, lead boldly.
Lead boldly. Yes. And I meant to tell you also when you were sharing about your accent, you sounded just like Sean Connery. I just had to share that with you.
Okay, thank you.
You're like, no, I didn't want to hear that one, right?
No, I did, because there's another Scottish comedian by the name of Billy Connolly, and
Oh,
he's a little guttural. Sean Connery's very refined.
he is, but so are you.
But he's James Bond.
So are you.
Okay,
Let me
well,
go
okay,
to
well,
your
on that
voice.
note, okay.
Oh,
It's getting
no,
hot in
seriously.
here all of a sudden. Whew.
All right. Well, thanks again, Hugh.
You're welcome.
And thanks again to you too, listeners. We really appreciate you tuning into the show. And there are literally millions of other podcasts that you could be listening to, and we do not take your patronage lightly. So please be sure to continue to like and subscribe to our podcast, and please share with just one friend, because together and working together, we will all be able to lead at the top of our game. Thanks a ton, and see you next week. And that's our show for today. Thank you for listening to the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast, where we help you lead your seat at any employer, business, or industry in which you choose to play. You can check out the show notes, additional episodes, bonus resources, and also submit guest recommendations on our website at leadyourgamepodcast.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn by searching for the name Karen Rhodes, with Karen being spelled Karan. And if you like the show, the greatest gift you can give would be to subscribe and leave a rating on your podcast platform of choice. This podcast has been a production of Shockingly Different Leadership, a global consultancy which helps organizations execute their people, talent development, and organizational effectiveness initiatives on an on-demand project or contract basis. Huge thanks to our production and editing team for a job well done. Goodbye for now.